Welcome to Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now you can learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property. Learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau with the Mineola Law Firm of Shane, Dox, Denisi, and Corker. He's a member of the Committee on Professional Ethics of the Bar Association of Nassau County and counsel to the Nassau Academy of Law. And now, here is your host for Law You Should Know, attorney Kenneth J. Landau.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. Today we'll be discussing important college planning issues, especially as they concern the law. And this is an important time to think about it before students go off to college. And our guest is Gerry Joyce, and he is the Managing Director and Deputy General Trust Counsel and National Head of Trust and Estates at Fiduciary Trust Company International. Gerry, welcome to Law You Should Know.
Thanks, Ken. Nice to be on.
I know people were focused on getting their kids into college and now getting them packed up and registered for classes. But are there some legal issues that go along with that will help them to have a more positive experience?
Yes, it's an interesting time. A lot of people don't really step back and say, gee, my daughter or son is now 18 and therefore an adult. And while they have different legal issues once they become an adult, it's also very important for parents to accept the fact that now they're dealing with someone who is an adult and has a lot of rights and privileges that they didn't have before they turned 18.
And in the eyes of the law, for most purposes, they're an adult and they do things on their own. Their parent can no longer speak for them as their guardian.
That's correct. And, the first area that often we see that come up, especially when someone's away at college, is that under the law, parents no longer have the right to be informed about medical or health issues or to make decisions on behalf of their children.
And I just want to add educational issues in that, too. You know, if a child is failing, you're not going to get notes home from the teacher.
That's correct.
Or misbehaving.
Well, you may hear, depending on what it is, but you certainly won't hear about their grades or reports on how they're doing in school. That's really between the school and your now adult child.
And hopefully all be good things, but in case there are some bad. So what are some essentials for them to do in light of that for the parent and the newly 18-year-old child?
Well, I think, again, you want to make sure that their well-being is taken care of, and I think one of the first places, once they realize there are issues, is in the health and medical area. So often we recommend that the parents get a health care proxy, which will allow them to make decisions should something come up. That would require a bit of explaining, perhaps to a young adult, the need for it, that it's really in the event typically of an emergency, and also that, even though they don't think it's likely that something will happen, one should plan ahead for that.
And it's really important because since they're 18 and considered an adult in the eyes of the law, if something happens to them, you can no longer step in and make decisions for them. A court will have to appoint someone.
Correct. And under HIPAA, there's a lot of privacy rights, and they're very strictly applied by healthcare providers and hospitals as they should. So the healthcare proxy, what it does is it's a designation by your child to allow you to make medical decisions should that become necessary. The law on this is called HIPAA, and a related aspect of this is a HIPAA release, because while the healthcare directive allows you to make decisions, what you really need first is information. And what a HIPAA release will do is allow the doctor or hospital to release medical information to the parents so that they can then make decisions. And again, you really need to sit your young person down saying, we hope you have a very healthy and happy time at school, but we just want to be prepared should something happen.
And it's really for emergency only, but this will allow you to act seamlessly, react quickly, and without a tremendous legal expense in case there's an emergency.
Yes, as you mentioned, it's otherwise you'd have to go to court to get a guardian, and in some places that could take months, even well-intentioned, and just would really happen at the worst possible time.
And let's talk about why a power of attorney. We hear about it being needed for people as they're getting older, before Alzheimer's sets in, or before they have a stroke. But why could it be important for a college student?
Well, a power of attorney is, it just really allows someone to act on behalf of someone else. And again, an 18-year-old may quickly just say, gee, I don't see the need for it. But first of all, the parents and the children, if they're not close together, there may be a lot of circumstances where it's helpful to have an adult, especially an adult you turn to for questions and advice, sign on your behalf. We see this with leases. If the child is renting an apartment, it may be helpful to have the parent who's likely co-signing on the lease anyway to also sign the lease for them. Also, a lot of children spend their junior year abroad, and from time to time you may need to send money to their bank account or send money to them in a foreign country. And it's just a lot easier to do that through the child's bank account, and the banks really will require then the parent to have a power of attorney so that they can put money into the account or transfer funds from that account in the U.S. to wherever the child is abroad.
And sometimes it's important to get the bank's form or maybe even the college's form for a HIPAA release to make sure they will honor it.
Yes, if you I think there's some debate over that in legal circles, but that's usually a very good place to start for certainly in the HIPAA area. It also, what it does is when you in the HIPAA release form, it puts your medical providers on notice that you want this to happen, and then likewise, the same thing may happen with your bank or financial institution.
And we'll talk about financial matters in a moment in greater detail, but why is there what are some reasons that they might even want to have a will before they go off to college?
Yes, this again a pretty heavy topic, and I think to bring up with an 18-year-old. But a will, I think what a parent or parents need to do with their child is say, you're now an adult. If you need to begin to look after your financial affairs, and one of them is what happens if something happens to you or happens to all of us, and just provide for where assets should go. Again, a lot of this, their belief in how much they need to do this may depend on how much they have in the way of assets. But it's important, I think, to have a young person begin to think in terms of being responsible, for transferring what they have to the right person. In some cases, they may have a life insurance policy somehow behind it, and the assets may be more significant than they think, and they should give some thoughts about where they want to give them. They may want to leave something to charity and say their parents are financially well off enough where they don't need assets. So it allows the young person, I think, begin to say, where should this go? And so a will really is the only way to do that. Otherwise, assets will pass. Again, there'll be a more complicated court proceeding, perhaps, and the assets may not actually pass to whom they want.
Let's talk about financial and other issues, and I know you're an expert in these things. Why is cybersecurity so important these days? Well, again, I think it's the prudent handling of your wealth, just like looking to someone to care for you or transferring your assets. Privacy and
Ensuring the security of your information is really, with each passing day, a bigger issue, and certainly governments and laws and regulators are doing more and more to ensure that. But part of it just starts with some basic common sense principles, and I think it's really part of the ABCs of financial education, and that is keep your personal data protected and safe. So that's anything from don't leave passwords around, don't share passwords with friends, don't leave your laptop open or your computer on when you're around, when you're not around. All of this is critical to make sure that the wrong people don't get your information. And likewise, just learning the basics of phishing or other type of scams where people through the internet try to get you to give them information. So, adages like never give your Social Security number to someone, and also just don't start answering questions on the phone with someone you really don't know as well.
And also be careful about phony emails coming to you asking you for private information or password information. Absolutely,
and really any any reputable firm. What you could do, for example, say it's, I know we'll talk about credit cards later, just look at the back of the credit card, call that number. If there's an email from that firm, call that number, they'll understand why you did it. And the same thing for your bank account, etc. Call the main number, ask for the person and get them. If you're not 100% sure of who you're talking to, that's always a prudent thing to do.
And also try to have a robust password.
Correct. And some firms will generate one for you. You just then need, perhaps, there's more and more online password vaults, because if you're like me, you may have a few more passwords than you'd care to have otherwise.
Okay. We're going to take a short break now. When we return, we'll talk about some other things regarding cybersecurity and financial security, especially geared to someone going to college or becoming an adult. Our guest is Gerry Joyce, and he is the Managing Director and Deputy General Trust Counsel, and also the National Head of Trust and Ethics at Fiduciary Trust Company International. And you're listening to Law You Should Know here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College, and also over the internet at nccradio.org. We'll be back in a moment.
This program is brought to you by Nassau Community College, which offers a paralegal studies program. Students can major in paralegal studies while earning their associate's degree, or earn a paralegal certificate if they already have a college degree. These programs can even help you start a second career as a paralegal. It's a program for anyone who wants to work in a law office assisting lawyers, the government, or a position in an insurance company. More information about full-time, part-time, days, evenings, weekends, or online courses is available by calling 516-572-7774 or by email at paralegal@ncc.edu.
Once again, we continue with Law You Should Know. From the Mineola Law Firm of Shane, Dox, Denise, Corker, and Sauer, here is attorney Kenneth J. Landau.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome back to Law You Should Know. We're talking about when children are ready to attend college and some of the financial and legal issues that should be considered before they go off, and especially when they turn 18. Our guest is Gerry Joyce. He's a Managing Director and Deputy General Trust Counsel and National Head of Trust and Estates at Fiduciary Trust Company International. Gerry, just before we go on, just going back to wills, you recommended why it's a good idea for someone to consider doing it, because an adult, they may have property, and maybe the children, the 18-year-olds and their parents and grandparents can do it together. But if they don't have a will, their property, if there is any, will be governed by intestacy, and if a child does not have any children, then it will all generally, depending on the state, but it will all generally go to their parents.
Correct.
Okay. And yes.
No, and so that's something that I think most young people would want to know where it's going, and then decide if that's where they want it to go.
And they can change that with a will.
Yes, and that's something we tell clients all the time. Will really only takes effect when you're not around anymore, and so you draft one, sign one, and if you decide you don't like something about it or want to add something, you can go back to your attorney and change it.
And sort of a will does it your way, rather than the state's way.
Correct, and the state's only trying to fill in a vacuum. Much better to have your own thoughts about it and know that you've done that in case something does happen.
And some of the issues that have been in the media lately are passwords. That if something happens to a person, if they become incapacitated, or God forbid they pass away, no one, Facebook or another website or an internet provider is not really going to provide any stranger with a password. Maybe even they would refuse to honor a court order. So what should young people do about that so that others, their loved ones, can have access to their email or other things if they're incapacitated?
Again, I think it depends on every provider is slightly different, but I think in some cases, that's where a power of attorney certainly would help to the extent the provider would allow somebody who is acting under power of attorney to get information, then that would be helpful.
And maybe to give someone that password.
Yes, in some cases, it depends if the person's has passed away. The law is still evolving here. I think we will probably get to a point where a number of states have passed laws. These are so-called digital assets, and more the people representing the estate of a person have the rights that the person had. But again, this is an unfortunate current intermix of various laws, federal laws, state laws. But I think we'll get to that point. But certainly, letting someone have your password. But again, that's a very personal decision. You give your password away, that can have consequences too.
And maybe just give it to someone who you're naming as a power of attorney. You have to use your judgment, but you just want to have someone else have access to it and be able to use it in case of emergency, rather than undergoing an expensive and time-consuming legal battle.
Correct. And I think that if you trust someone implicitly and you give them a power of attorney, then it certainly makes sense to.
But maybe keep it hidden so they would only open that information under certain circumstances that you can make clear to them.
Yes, that's a possibility, and or have them keep it in a safe place. But now, that's more and more digital assets. We're seeing questions with this, and it really has to do with taking a look at what you'd want someone to have access to and making sure that they can effectively do that.
When someone becomes an adult, they also become an adult in the world of credit and finance. So tell us what implications that has for the student going to college.
Yeah, we often see, someone getting a bank account when they go to college just to make payments easier, but also applying for credit cards. And it can be a very good thing for a young person in that it's important for them to establish good credit. We adults all understand that. They may not understand, so it probably takes some teaching to say the value of making your payments on time, not carrying too much of a balance, etc. The difficulty in obtaining credit cards is that the young individual, because they have no financial history, typically can't get it on their own and require a parent to co-sign and guarantee those payments. But it is, in the long run, a good thing. Eventually, landlords and the like will look at credit history, and to the extent they have a positive credit history, even if it's one supported by one's parents, will be a big help to them in their financial life. Again, that's something. It's part of this is educational. A lot of young people may not understand how critical it is to have a good credit rating.
And I think you mentioned it before, and I just want to make sure it's very clear that a young person and anyone else should not give out their date of birth or their Social Security number or any other specific identification information, because it can be misused or abused or stolen by people with evil intentions and lead to identity theft.
Right. And again, one easy way to deal with this is to just be absolutely sure you know who you're talking to or you're communicating with. And again, all the reputable firms have email addresses or phone numbers that you can call or reach out to ensure that it's done on a secure basis. Because
there can be scams with fake email, fake websites, of course, fake phone calls. The other thing is that some banks will set up a debit card with the college student so they can begin having a sort of credit card and demonstrate their ability to repay money on a monthly basis. Some type of secured card.
Correct.
And it's very important because the years of college go fast, and you want to build up a positive credit report and try to elevate your credit score, which will become very important when you're trying to buy a car, perhaps even when you're applying for insurance or applying for a job.
Right. And that's the plus side. I think what you also need to impart, to a child is that there's a downside if you don't make the payments or if you use the debit card, irresponsibly or carry a zero balance for too long. That can have some negative implications as well, especially on the credit side, late payments, et cetera. So one has to understand that while having good credit can be an excellent thing in your life, not to dismiss or not appreciate the flip side of that, which is a negative credit experience.
Right. It's an adult responsibility that you have to learn to get used to.
That's what this is all about, financial education, becoming an adult and understanding the realities of an adult world and how finances are treated.
And I just want to just go one step beyond. I know you've presented a lot of good information. It is also important for young people and people turning 18 and perhaps those older and younger to be careful about their social media presence.
Correct. Again, the laws are evolving here, but pretty much anybody you meet, and even an employer to the extent allowed, is going to check out what you've done on social media. So, any comments you make, anything that could be viewed as offensive, anything that could be viewed as embarrassing, can turn around and hurt you later on.
And this includes pictures as well. Unflattering pictures or pictures you thought were private. Nothing is private and everything is really forever.
Yeah, I think the best advice anyone can give you is don't put anything out there on the internet into social media that you wouldn't want to see on the front page of the paper. And I think if you live by that, you won't have any negative experiences. And also, at Fiduciary Trust, if you're from a family, where you're fortunate enough to have some significant wealth, be careful about, putting out, facts about your family that you don't want there. Keep your family situation, as private as you can, without giving out information that you don't want.
And also your work and that of your company, if a family has some wealth or a family has some assets that they want to eventually pass on to their children, you can arrange for it to be done in a gradual, orderly process through various trusts.
Right, through trusts, and trusts, are perfectly appropriate ways to pass down, hard-earned wealth. It's subject to the taxes that apply. But also back to the will for the young person, some of these trusts allow an individual to say where the trust property goes at a certain point. And so that's another reason to sit down, for someone who is fortunate enough to have a family where there are multi-generational trusts holding family wealth, to do a will that will then help pass it down in a careful, thoughtful way.
And it can be in a gradual way, too.
Exactly, and also that also implies that that the parents have to sit down with the children and begin to explain to them what is being held by the family, how it's held, and that, I think, is a conversation that has to be thought through and communicated carefully, and as I think you will point out, perhaps on a gradual basis.
And I just want to mention also, it doesn't absolutely have to do with finances, but it's a continuing area of legal tension and of evolution, is behavior and use of drugs and alcohol on a college campus. Many schools are cracking down on that. Many problems related to that can lead to other problems, and some of them can have permanent and serious consequences.
Absolutely. Even schools in states where certain activities or drugs have been legalized don't permit that activity on campus. So one needs to know the rules of the campus, and then likewise, if you do something that is illegal, just because it's on campus, don't assume that there are no consequences. And if you do it off campus, you are off campus, and the police are going to do their job. And
you want to be careful, make sure these things are used moderation and responsibly, and even if you're part of an organization, a fraternity, or sorority,
correct.
Everything's being more closely looked at the moment and in the future.
And yes, and also, even if you happen to be in college and be 21, if you're around others who are not, the law is going to expect you to be responsible and not facilitate underage drinking or taking of a substance.
Gerry, we just have a moment left in the program. Just tell us how listeners can find out more about these topics, perhaps your website.
Yes, we have published a number of articles on transferring wealth, and also dealing with issues affecting younger generation members of our families. They can be found on our website at www.ftci.com, and a lot of good pieces on financial topics of various sorts, and also planning and legal topics in dealing with wills and trusts.
As I just want to mention that again, it's ftci.com. This program is presented for information only, and you can hear any parts of it again or mention it to someone else and have a free podcast of it at our website, nccradio.org. I would like to thank our guest, Gerry Joyce, from Trust and Estates at Family Trust Company International, for being our guest and talking about this most important and difficult subject. Please join us next week at the same time for another program of Law You Should Know on Law You Should Know on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College, and also over the internet at nccradio.org.